So don't worry if you don't have too much spare time today, guys, because I don't feel like we're going to be hanging out for all that long today. So in the month of May, I did not read very much, and going into May I kind of anticipated this, but I feel like I didn't anticipate like truly how little I was going to read. I knew it wasn't going to be my best reading month ever, but I didn't know it was going to be actually my worst reading month ever. When we get to the stats are only representative of the books that I finished in May. I am currently reading 4 books, 2 of which I'm about halfway through, 2 of which I barely started, but that was a fatal error on my part, just starting so many books. When I'm not somebody that tends to dip between books anyway, I'm very much a start and finish a book kind of gal. And I am going to briefly mention the books that I'm currently reading and how far into them I am, but I do talk about them in, I guess, a little bit more detail in my June TBR because they are rolling over into June. And I think that you guys are actually going to be surprised at the genres that we have coming up in this video. There's not a single fantasy book that I read in May, and I think you can very much tell from the length of these that I was very much looking for easier reads, because I feel like my downfall in May really is that something that I didn't account for. I accounted for having plans, but I didn't account for the fact that I'm not somebody who can read to relax. I have to be relaxed. I have to feel accomplished. I have to feel like I've wrapped up everything that I'm working on for that day and that I'm at a point of relaxation and being done for the day before I can pick a book. So very much when I'm preoccupied, I'm not reading, and that is mainly the reason why, because in between everything else I had going on, I had a lot going on here, which is the main reason I feel that I didn't read too much. But getting into those statistics, I want to iterate as well, I'm truly not mad that I read so little. I'm just surprised. In the month of May, I read 3 books, which added up to a total of 729 pages, which broke down to an average of 25 pages a day, which is less than a quarter of my typical reading. I had 1 1-star read, and I haven't had a 1-star read since at least 2021, but potentially 2020, and 2 3-stars. For the demographics, we had 3 adult books. For the formats, 2 of them were standardly formatted novels, and 1 was a manga. For the genres, we had 1 romance, 1 non-fiction, and 1 fantasy romance that isn't actually a fantasy romance, it's just that was the best way that I could categorize it in the moment. And for the places where I source these books from, all 3 of them are books that I have hauled in 2023. So cracking on with those reviews, we are going to be kicking off with the 1-star read, which, to be fair, I gave this book 1 star, not because I hated it, but because I didn't enjoy a single thing about it. So it's very much not super present in my mind right now, but I was a co-host of the Literature Book Club. The book in question is The Intimacy Experiment by Rosie Danan, but I was a co-host of the Literature Book Club for April, so there is a live show that contained my full spoilery thoughts on this, and I also talk about it quite a lot in my vlog, so I will link that just in case I can't, because I know that I'm going to miss out things that I didn't like about this book talking about it now, because I started this in April, I finished it right at the beginning of May, and I've pretty much just put it from my mind. But this one is a contemporary romance about a woman who has a sex positive startup company that specializes or focuses on sex education. So I'm not sure exactly, like if I signed up for this subscription, this online subscription, I'm not exactly sure what I would be getting, but I know that it is about sex education and there's like instructional videos and that kind of thing. But she's looking to take her business to the next level and she wants to do like in-person teaching, and she's really struggling to get people to take her seriously because the topic, like her topic, is sex. So she is approached at this conference by a love interest who is Ethan, and Ethan is a rabbi. He's looking to get more people into his synagogue because the main people he has there are older people and his congregation are dwindling. So he wants to get younger people attending his synagogue, and he thinks that having Naomi teach a class on modern intimacy will do that. So she thinks that he's joking, but eventually she does take him up on his offer, and this book is kind of formatted in the lectures that she's given on modern intimacy. So Naomi's a little bit cagey about this because it's kind of alluded to that she has a complex relationship with religion, assumedly because her background is in porn, like she was a porn star before she set up this sex positive startup. I say alluded to because I feel like nothing that is introduced in this book is ever wrapped up. Like, it is alluded to that she has a complex relationship with religion. It's alluded to that she grew up Jewish and that she felt like she was shunned from her community when she started to work in the porn industry, but it's never like carried through. Like, we have some speculation about her parents and their religion, which is never confirmed, because as these two characters grow closer to each other, it obviously, like, Naomi doesn't want Ethan's work as a rabbi to be devalued because of his relationship with an ex-porn star. So all of these kind of things are called into question, but they're never followed up on. Like, there is speculation about her parents and it's alluded to that she has certain feelings about religion, but it's never actually confirmed. I feel like the characters in here do a disservice to themselves and what they're trying to achieve, and it very much felt like there was no compromise in this book in the relationship, and everybody was expected to just bend over backwards to accommodate these people without, I feel, these people ever kind of making any sort of compromise or having a realistic or like serious struggle with decision making and how their lives are going to look when they try and factor each other into it. I feel like Naomi wanting to take her business to the next level and wanting to have these in-person teaching roles is very much undermined at the end of this book with some of her actions, which truly I found to be immature and didn't make much sense to me. Throughout the majority of the beginning of this, I felt like I was just very, very bored. I didn't understand why these two wanted to be together. I still don't understand why they actually want to be in a relationship with each other, because from what I can gather from reading this book, they just think that the other one is hot, like they're attracted to each other, and that is pretty much it. So this book truly did nothing for me. Like I said, I don't hate this book. I don't have such, which is normally why something gets a 1 star from me. Like, I have very strong negative feelings. With this, I truly just did not enjoy a single thing about it, and I don't think a single thing was done well. Anything that was a plot point kind of just fizzled out into nowhere and had no conclusion. I felt like this book had the opportunity to deal with so many poignant topics, especially things like sex and religion, or like modern intimacy for religious people, and this kind of melding of religion and modern life. And it had a lot to say, or it could have said a lot about how religion and religious practices are outdated and don't fit into the lives of the majority of like young individuals in the 2020s. But it just didn't. It felt to me that it had all of these things in it to hook you in, but it didn't handle anything with any kind of nuance, any depth, or even really went into it. There was just so much conversation that could be had about everything in this book, and it amounted to nothing, in my opinion. So very much did not enjoy this at all. I probably won't be reading. I do have The Roommate by Rosie Danan. Maybe I will give it a chance. I know it's in my Inner Circle Patreon jar, but I am also going to, I feel, be giving myself full license to DNF it, because this was a terrible experience for me. I haven't given a book 1 star in such a long time, but I just felt like I couldn't give it anything higher. So yeah, not a great start to my month. I finished this very early in the month, and I then read absolutely nothing until the day I came back from New York, where I started a book in JFK while I was in the TSA queue, and I finished it the day that I got home, which it ended up crossing over 2 days with the way that the time difference was. But that was a non-fiction, and that was Speak by Tunde Oyeniyin. This is a non-fiction from a Peloton instructor. As y'all know, I'm a firm believer in the Peloton ethos. I am very aware though of the marketing strategy of Peloton, which is absolutely genius. It combines like influencers and like fitness memberships, so essentially it hooks you in by creating like a personal kind of connection between yourself and the instructors that you choose to work out with, who are very personable, and then it entices you to like spend more money in that. So like, the reason there's 2 Peloton instructor books out, and there's at least 2, oh no, there's more than that actually. There's at least 3 Peloton instructor books out, and I know of 2 that are coming out this year. So it's clearly becoming a little bit of a trend, and it is solely like, I'm under no illusion that these books are pretty much just being published because it's Peloton instructors, not because they're phenomenal or have anything like groundbreaking to say. But yeah, that's the reason why I picked this one up. And when I was in the airport, I just needed something a little bit lighter than my current read. So this one is I want to say it's like a self-help book, like a motivational, inspirational book using stories from her life to reinforce the points that she's making. And she has an acronym which is SPEAK, that stands for success, power, empathy, authenticity, and knowledge. And these are kind of like the tenets that she lives by. So each chapter has one of these as like the, I guess, the category that the chapter falls into. So chapter 3 is power, and it's like a story from her life, what she learned from that, how she grew, and how that kind of changed her as a person and put her on the path that she's currently on. So I feel like this, from the cover, from everything going on here, I expected this to be more self-helpy than it was. It felt very autobiographical under the guise of being self-help. Like, I enjoyed this. I cried at parts throughout this where she's talking about things like really hard things that have happened in her life. I do have some content warnings in here. There's definitely racism and police brutality. There's definitely death of a family member. There's also a lot of talk about like weight loss and body image, because something that I did actually really enjoy about this is how she talks about her struggle with her self-image and not having a particularly curvy figure and struggling with that, and she's got very muscular, like gorgeous muscular arms, which was always a point of self-consciousness for her when she was younger. And I really appreciated all of that about it, but I felt like it's trying to be motivational and inspirational, and I didn't take away anything from it necessarily that inspired me to make change in my own life, which I feel like is what it was going for. That being said, I was very interested in it. I thought that it was compulsively readable. There were points of emotion in there. I didn't necessarily like the structure of it because it doesn't go chronological, like it's specific stories that relate to the point that she's trying to make, so it doesn't all fall in order. And I just felt like it didn't quite come together. For me, I don't read a lot of nonfiction. I especially don't read self-help. When I do read nonfiction, I very much only read nonfiction in areas that I'm particularly interested in. Like, the only nonfiction I've ever reviewed on my channel are the books by the YouTuber Ask a Mortician, and they're about like death and death culture. So it's very much niche areas that I'm interested in, or I'm interested in the person who has wrote it. So I am by no means an expert. I don't know if this is typical, like whether self-help / autobiographical kind of books are very common, and it's just that I'm not experienced with them. But I don't feel like this inspired me to make any great change in my life, but I did find it interesting. But then it also kind of left me wanting more. Like, it didn't feel like a finished package. So I do feel kind of weird rating a nonfiction, especially when it is so autobiographical. But in my gut, I do feel like this is a 3-star. I really enjoyed it while I was reading it, but I don't think it's going to leave any kind of like lasting impression on me. And then the final book that I read in the month was for my Patreon 24-hour readathon for the month of May. The prompt this time was poll pick, and I did it as an emoji poll. I had a couple of polls running, and the second poll that I put up was for a quicker read to read alongside my main read, so I could switch between something a little bit more dense and a little lighter. And I feel like my patrons, even though it was an emoji poll, they very quickly guessed what this was, because I read Dick Fight Island Volume 1 by, I think it's Rayburn EK, and this is, that pronunciation could be completely wrong. I did try and look it up, but I didn't get anything that I would say is necessarily reliable in terms of pronunciation. So this one is the first in a yaoi manga. This is the one that I have categorized as fantasy romance, essentially for the sake of my genre blanket, because I really just did not know where to put this, and I didn't know what to expect with this one either. This was a gift from Ash. Thank you very much, Ash, for sending this my way. I actually had a good time. But this is set on a group of islands where one representative of each of the clans of each of the islands is put into a tournament. I think it's every 4 years, and they fight. And whoever wins, whoever is the last one standing, becomes the king of the island, and whoever comes first loses. So it's a series of one-on-one battles. I thought this was going to be more like the Hunger Games, but it's a series of one-on-one battles in like a tournament structure, and the winner becomes the next king of the islands. So obviously the main appeal of this is how kind of bizarre the synopsis is, and it truly is bizarre. I knew going into this that I couldn't take it too seriously, so I absolutely didn't, and because of that I did have a decent time. It is very explicit, just to warn you before you head into this. I feel like you can imagine that it is, but it is for sure very explicit. It's something interesting that I feel I've heard about this a lot, is that the plot is actually decent. And you know what? I wouldn't necessarily say it's the plot that's decent, but the world building for sure is way more intricate than I expected it to be. It has like every person who is a member of this tournament like has a clan, clan, and each clan has a thing that they're known for. It does go into like the clans and a little bit of the history of the tournament, and all of that element of it seemed, well, it was a lot more well developed than I expected it to be going into it. The reason why I gave this a 3, because I would say it's a 4 in terms of enjoyment, is because I did feel like it was a little bit rushed. There are a lot of characters in here. There's 8 people who are competing in this tournament as well as side characters, and it's just a lot to get to grips with at the beginning of this. And I didn't expect, because I know that this is a manga that is in there's volumes, there's more to come. I didn't expect the entire tournament to be in this one volume, but it is. Like, all of the rounds of the tournament is in this, and you find out like who the king of the island is like by the end of this one quite small volume. So I felt like pacing wise it was definitely a little bit off, and I would have appreciated it if it was drawn out a little bit more. I 100% enjoyed this the most just because of how bizarre it was, and I was mainly turning pages to see what kind of came next. The extent of the world building did surprise me, but overall I'm not desperate. Like, if you placed volume 2 of this in my hands, I would probably read it, but when I got to the end of this, especially because the tournament does wrap up in it, I have no overwhelming urge to like run out and buy the sequel. So who knows if I'll ever continue with this, but it was definitely better than I expected it to be, and yeah, I can confirm that I liked it. And so in terms of what we're currently reading, like I said, I did mention them in a bit more detail in my wrap up and kind of like why I was reading them, why I put them down. But the book that I'm furthest in is going to be the book that I finished first in June. I mean, I feel like that kind of speaks for itself, but that is The Dragon Reborn by Robert Jordan, which I can say that I'm actually really enjoying at this point. I'm 423 pages into this and reading it for Wheel of Time along, and the live show is going to be on the 4th of June at 9 p.m. BST on Mel from Lenore Reads channel if you are interested. But I will 100% have this done by the 4th because I'm a co-host of Wheel of Time along. The one that I'm the next most the one that I'm next most the furthest the one that I'm next furthest through. I feel like you know what I'm trying to say, but I'm on page 310 of Blood Solace by Viola Roth. This one is my Patreon book club pick for the months of April and May. So I'm kind of reading these. I have this in daily sections, and if I get to the end of my daily section of this, then I move over to this one. I've just been a little bit slow with this one, and obviously this one's my priority. So this one is a fantasy romance, and I imagine I'll be finishing this one up or getting back into it properly at least when The Dragon Reborn is done. Ideally, I'll be a lot further into this by the time I'm done with The Dragon Reborn, because what I don't want is these that I'm currently reading to take up most of my month and then not get around to much else. But I started both of these in May, and I actually read the same amount across both of these as I did in all of the books that I finished. So if these were smaller books, I could have read 3 more books here. And then there are 2 more that I'm currently reading that I barely started. The one that I'm furthest through and most excited to get back to is Iron Gold by Pierce Brown. I'm reading this physically while listening along to the audiobook. This is one of my favorite series of all time. It's book 4, the start of a new story arc. And what I read of this was phenomenal. It's just when, like, I started it on the way to New York, and it requires more immersion than I was able to give it, because like plugging into an audio and reading along, I really get in the zone, and I just didn't have that opportunity on the way back. And as soon as I got back, I knew that I had to start The Dragon Reborn or get back into The Dragon Reborn to realistically have it done in time for the live show. So this one kind of fell by the wayside, but absolutely my top priority as soon as I finished the 2 book club books. And then the final one that I started right at the end of my 24-hour readathon, so I'm not very far into it. I'm on page 18, but that is Gwen and Art Are Not in Love. This is an arc for me, and like everything, I'm reading everything in priority order, so hopefully that will be the way that I finish them. But I feel like the good thing to come from not reading very much in May but being partway through multiple books is that my June's gonna seem pretty hefty, because I read like 700 pages out of just 2 books in the month of May, which will give me a little bit of a jump start on June. But yeah, that was my May wrap up. Not the most. We move. It happens. Let me know what your favorite book of May was and whether you had a good reading month. Did you read a lot or did you not? Like me. But aside from that, guys, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram, and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish Kindle website, the Etsy for that, and a 10% off discount code. That's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go and nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.